Okay, so Sprint 3, front-end video. This is Ben speaking. We're going to be demonstrating here how we went ahead and built a new foundation for our front end that was more ready to go and set up to communicate with the backend, and specifically with the database that our backend team is setting up with Gorm, along with a front end that is better suited to interact with the user authentication system that we're going to be incorporating. And so we're going to see how we accomplish that and what kind of things we added onto the front end that we had no conception of before, and they weren't essentially ready to go to communicate with another server or any backend sort of technology in the first place. And so let me mute my Discord notifications there for the purposes of not interrupting the video. So first thing I'm going to show is unit testing, or actually it's actually end-to-end testing in this sprint that we managed to accomplish. Last sprint we did unit testing. Now that we have HTTP traffic control and functionality, we have a more fully functional sort of foundation here for our front end, and so naturally end-to-end testing more so targets the goals and the user stories that we're looking to accomplish and address here. So for example, if we want a user to be notified about whether something was a fortune was found for a search that they input, then with this logging functionality that we're going to get into in a second, they can see whether or not something was found or not found depending on what they search. So as you can see here, it was found because there are past fortunes that they have received, and this is all stored in like a mock HTTP remote server. So getting back to that in a second, putting that off just for the moment, I'm going to go ahead and start npx Cypress open to showcase the main end-to-end test that we incorporated here. We had a bunch of smaller ones that these weren't directly applicable to our applications. These were for an example application to get an idea of how end-to-end testing worked. But this one here is targeted to this app that you see right here. And what it does is it does two things. It first of all checks to see if the server is reachable on this address at this port, and whether or not the page itself, so it's parsing the HTML, the direct object model, and checking for the words fortune cookie. So we want to make sure that the site is fortune cookie and it's not some other random site that's getting hosted on that same address and on that same port. So going back to Cypress here, going into end-to-end testing, we're going to launch that in Firefox, and we're going to use the very elegant design. We decided we had to completely ditch the idea of using the front end CSS sort of Angular UI kit that we were using, because the Angular version that it was using was not up to date enough to be compatible with any real versions of Cypress. So we had a lot of restructuring to do, to say the least. But the good thing now is that we can get Cypress working, and not only that, we can get a fully functional end-to-end test that's going to be pretty fundamental and pretty important moving into our last sprint after this one. So as you can see, Cypress uses its own HTTP requesting, I guess, functionality and its own like tech stack to visit this site at this address and parse through the input or through the output that the HTTP request returns to see if it has fortune cookie, and as you can see it does. So we passed the test, and this can easily be expanded on to test for different things, such as whether or not the delay for a search is debounced enough time. If I'm coming across, if I'm being understandable when I'm saying that, debounced refers to like the time in between typing something and actually sending out a request for checking for that term in this case. But that's a little bit off topic. Going back to the main point here, so this end-to-end test, it's working, and we are hoping to expand it a lot more in this last test to check to see if the integration for everything is all set up completely as how we want it. So now just to quickly go over some of the main aspects of this new front end, because I don't want to make this video too long. Going to the dashboard here, we have the routing set up so that if a user just visits the root of this site, it's going to take them directly to their dashboard, where they're going to see their fortunes or at least part of their fortunes in this case in the dashboard. They can search for fortunes, and on top of that, we've incorporated a logging functionality into this new front end so that not only can the users know, for example, if I look up a fortune that's not going to exist, not only do the users get notified that, and that's part of our user stories, for users to know whether or not something succeeded in terms of finding their past fortunes, but the back end also is has valuable applications for this information for not only debugging, but also to make sure that the way that we end up incorporating the GORM SQL database into our application, as well as the authentication mechanisms, that they actually function correctly and that they're getting the correct inputs and the outputs, so to speak. So the way that this past fortune search essentially works is that if I go into the component that I made for that, you can see, for example, that it has these two observable imports from the RxJS library, which is really important for asynchronous calls that are fundamental to this new front-end design that we have here. So they get so those are used to essentially query stuff asynchronously, and by asynchronously we mean that when I'm looking up a past fortune or when I'm going to get my past cookies, these cookies are stored in a remote server, so they're not going to be returned instantly. So for that, we need asynchronous calls, asynchronous behavior in our application here. And so we do stuff such as debalance the time for when we're searching something. If we're searching for something, we don't want to send out the same request if the same thing is already being searched for, has already been searched for. And it's all this functionality, all this sort of networking functionality that we're getting through libraries like RxJS. If I go here into my services here that I have for, and this service that I made here, for example, controls the like the mock remote HTTP server. This message service is what handles the different messages that you see here that tell you whether something succeeded or did not, and so on and so forth. Essentially, is what you get sort of the idea of what's happening here. And to show the one final, I guess, file to summarize this all, I want to, for some reason, I'm not able to find it right now. Wait, here it is. So if I go into the template, the way that this all comes together is that we tie it all together into the template for the app component. We specify that the router outlet is going to start at this dashboard, and we include the app-messages component here in the HTML to show what we have there. And we also do these router links to the different to the other components that we have here, represented by the dashboards and the past cookies. So with that being said, that's it for my video. Like and subscribe, essentially.